We are joined with Jeremy Kuzmarov. He is managing editor for Covert Action Magazine and author of several books on U.S. foreign policy. Jeremy, my man, how you doing today? You doing all right this morning?
I'm doing great, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you. Better that you're joining me. Um, I want to go to Ukraine for a bit. There have been fascinating developments that have been taking place. For one, it has been reported this morning that Putin and Trump have a call set up for Tuesday. So there's that. There was a bit of weirdness on whether or not they had talked before on the issue of Kursk, but apparently it was Witkoff that was apparently talking to Putin that Donald Trump was effectively saying, I called on him or we talked. Okay. Also, you had the events in Kursk. So General Gerasimov comes out and says the following. I know I pulled this clip. I know I pulled this clip. Where's this clip? Okay, maybe I did not pull the clip. Damn it, I thought I pulled the clip. Oh, I did pull the clip right here. So this is him giving a presentation, effectively saying, look, we've killed 67,000 troops, Ukrainian forces in Kursk, and the rest are surrounded.
Commander-in-Chief, the North Group is continuing to destroy the enemy in the Kursk region. We liberated more than 1,100,000 square meters of our territory. It's about 86% of the territory captured by the enemy. During this time, our enemy lost more than 67,000 servicemen. These are the highly motivated, highly trained troops, the Ukrainian army. Commander-in-Chief, the North Group is continuing to destroy the enemy in the Kursk.
That term, destroy the enemy, there's something wild about that term. I'm not saying it's okay. It does sound a little bit funny to me. Destroy the enemy. We're destroying the enemy. Okay, we're killing all of these Ukrainian troops that are there, and apparently there are thousands that are surrounded in Kursk. Now, don't take my word for it. Reuters even reports it straight. Tens of thousands of Ukrainian troops are surrounded, encircled. They've lost contact with their command. They are there, and the ones that did try to leave got routed and were effectively gunned down. All right. So Trump comes out with a Truth Social post and is begging for the lives of these Ukrainians. I've never seen anything like it. Please spare their lives. This is going to be the worst disaster since the Second World War, etc. Right here, just so the audience can see it, not making it up. Please save their lives from Trump on Truth Social. Putin comes back and responds to this and says, look, I am empathetic to the lives of these people who are going to be lost in Kursk. I'm sympathetic to that. They need to surrender. If they surrender, they will be treated humanely. That is the only way out. Death or surrender. You're either going to be maneuvering into the afterlife, or you're going to maneuver into our ranks when we take you as POWs. There is no two ways about it. Now, Zelensky, and weirdly enough, Kiev is coming out saying, we are still continuing operations in Kursk, meaning the US side acknowledges they're surrounded. The Russian side acknowledges they're surrounded. Reuters even acknowledges they're surrounded. And they're still like, we're still staying. We're still doing maneuvers. Those people are going to die. Kiev has effectively refused Putin's surrender initiative. And Putin gave them a couple of days to even come to their own conclusions about whether or not they were going to give a general order to surrender. They have decided not to. What is going on with this? I'm fascinated by this because they've effectively said those people are just going to die.
Well, this, is continuity from the entire war. They've sent the Ukrainian into a meat grinder. They wave. It was easy to get the population here, or gullible element of it, to wave Ukrainian flags and make how pro-Ukraine they were. But really, they're just sending young Ukrainian men and presumably some women to their death. And how many Ukrainians have died, and what have they got out of this? A lot of that billion in aid was stolen by Zelensky's cronies, and I mean, they've taken on the Russians. The Russians is a powerful military. They have a history of being able to mobilize their population in the face of foreign aggression. They see this as foreign aggression, and Ukraine has lost considerable territory, and their economy has been shattered. And they've lost a lot of their, youth, just like in the First World War. So this is, I mean, a fool's crusade, and Ukraine has been used in a pawn all along as part of the scheme, by Western countries to try and weaken and destabilize Russia. And what point will the Ukrainians revolt against their commanders? I mean, that's what you saw in Vietnam, where American soldiers said, "Enough, we're not going to fight a senseless war anymore." And they started revolting against their commanders, and ultimately, Nixon had to adopt the Vietnamization. But in this case, I mean, I'm just waiting for the Ukraine to revolt, because it's been a fool's crusade for them, and they've been used, and they've been the ultimate losers in all this. And I mean, it's pathetic to see these liberals who claim to be for human rights and waving these Ukrainian flag, and they've sent
Right
all
there.
these people to their death. And this was totally avoidable. You had the Minsk agreement that would have worked out some kind of framework, but then Angela Merkel said, "Oh, we just signed that to buy time to arm Ukraine." I mean, they weren't serious about a peace settlement. And I mean, it was the West and U.S. that orchestrated the coup in 2014 that destabilized Ukraine and put in these hard right nationalists who were intent on taking on the Russians. Before that, Ukraine had very peaceful relation with the Russians.
Yeah, everything you just said is true, 1,000%. I'm fascinated by three strands that are happening at once. One, Trump moved to end the war. Now, I think a dance is being done with Trump and Putin in trying to get Europe and Ukraine, trying to drag that horse to water and make that horse drink, especially on the idea of peace terms. Now, Mark Rutte came to the US. He gets humiliated by Trump in the way that Trump is talking about Denmark and Greenland. But if you notice, when he goes back, he's like, yeah, NATO is off the table. And more to the point, we need to restart diplomatic relations with Russia. Okay, this is pretty astonishing. Since 30, 40 days earlier, you were screaming that we're going to be fighting the Russians forever. He's been bent into shape. Witkoff comes back and says this on CNN. Again, they're not talking about something going on for months. They're saying, we believe we can reach a deal within weeks. This is Wickoff. Again, rather astonishing.
President Putin. I think the meeting was somewhere between 3 and 4 hours. It was positive. We discussed. It was a solution-based discussion, and that's how I would describe it. I met with.
So they're saying that, look, we believe we can get a peace deal. We believe we can reach terms. That this is not something that is going to drag. We believe we can get a deal. We believe that Putin agrees on the main tenets of a deal. And I guess the issue becomes, okay, what is that deal going to look like? They believe they can get a deal that is just not a surrender. I think it's going to be a surrender, with other stuff added into it, because there are other negotiations that are taking place over top of the issue of Ukraine. I like Witkoff, believe it or not. He seems to be a straight shooter. When he was talking to Israel, I like the fact that he, had no F's to give in regards to that conversation. But I get the sense that they are having a different conversation than what they are giving to the world. I think they're trying to solve it, and they're coming up with, okay, what are the terms to solve it? And ultimately, Ukraine and Europe are going to be presented with a deal, not that they're negotiating a deal, if that makes sense. Give me your take on this and what Wickoff is saying, because I want to go to Europe, because Europe is trying to be a fly in the ointment with Starmer and Macron trying to come up with troops to go into Ukraine after any sort of ceasefire that's taken place, which is a non-starter and would end any negotiation, any idea of a ceasefire. Meaning they're trying to be a fly in the ointment to any deal that Donald Trump is coming up with. Give me your take.
Now, it is a bit puzzling, yeah, and observing this, it's puzzling these Europeans, how gung-ho and zealous they are about trying to continue this war, and what have they gotten out of it? I mean, it's really been bad war for Europe. It's been a costly war. The destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline was very bad for Europe. It forced up energy prices.
Yeah.
Russia is a potentially, very good trading partner for these countries. The Putin government was not, well, initially very hostile to Europe. I mean, he was more in the pro-West wing of his party. So, it's really puzzling to see the European kind of leaders have lost their head, and I
Yes.
think a lot of these leaders really lack legitimacy among their own population, and that's why we're seeing a lot of anger in the United States and in Europe with regard to political leadership. And unfortunately, the political right and far right is seizing on this moment, and it's the right wing, like it's the Trumps, it's the Orbans who are promoting more sensible policy with regard to Russia, and that's giving them a moral high ground among a considerable part of their population. And unfortunately, a lot of their other policies are very bad in other
Yes.
areas. In this area, I think they're much better, and that's one reason a lot of people did vote in Trump, because the Biden, in the United States, Biden was so Russophobic and such a gung ho, zealous hawk that he was courting nuclear war, and it really scared a lot of people. And he was totally irrational in dealing with the Russians. Whereas we do see a much more sensible approach with Trump. Now, will Trump acquiesce to certain key Russian provisions? I hope so. In the past, he's adopted a fairly hard line, but times have changed, and
Yeah.
the Trump administration may also want to set their sights on China. I mean, I think they see China the greater threat around the world. Its growing economy and with the Belt and Road Initiative and the quest for mineral wealth. There was a report just issued by a think tank, Center for Strategic and International Studies, about this growing competition for minerals that's needed, to fuel the modern economy and
Yeah.
clean energy revolution. And China really has the upper hand, much more than Russia. China is very active in Africa and certain key countries where there are minerals. And China is much stronger. So I think Trump sees China as a threat. He wants to end this and channel U.S. focus toward containing China. And if you can draw in Russia into more of a strategic alliance with the United States, that'll undermine the Russian-Chinese alliance that will, is really a threat to U.S. dominance of the world. So.
Before moving over, okay, let me make the question more concise. What do you make of the moves that Donald Trump is making in regards to ending the war? I mean, I've had guests come on the show that says they don't believe that a U.S. president can acquiesce to the demands of Russia on this issue. I agree with you, though. I think Trump doesn't care about this issue. I think for him, as you pointed out, China is a bigger issue than this. And he would, all things being equal, rather have diplomatic relations with Russia. He doesn't believe it's in the U.S. interest to continue down this particular path. Give me your take on this, though. Wickoff going to Russia, the conversation that he's going to have with Putin tomorrow. What do you think that conversation is about? And what do you think that conversation is effectively trying to affect?
Well, one other thing to be weary of is that if they're not sincere, I mean, yeah, Russia is about to, take over the Kursk, and now would be a very opportune time for the Ukrainians to have a ceasefire and to try and build up their military to mount some
Yes.
kind of defense. So you have to be weary about that. But on the other hand, I think, yeah, like what you're saying, that the Trump administration wants to move on, maybe end this. I mean, his base certainly wants to end this. A
Yes.
lot of the public see this as a wasteful war. A lot has come out about the corruption. Even this Jack Teixeira, was just in the news. He was denouncing it as a corrupt boondoggle. So more and more of this has come to public light. Whistleblowers. So I mean, the public, I think, and leaders are responsive to always to the public, even more authoritarian states. But so I hope Trump is sincere about wanting to end it. Time will tell, though, about that, because don't forget the U.S. government in general. The neocons who still dominate the landscape. I mean, they have this long design to kind of bleed the Russians in Ukraine and keep imposing these sanctions that will inhibit the growth of their economy and keep them weak so they can dominate Eurasia, which is rich in oil and gas and which they really place high value on. So I don't know if they're going to totally give that up.
But
On
that
the
has
other hand,
failed.
I think they are switching to China as their focus. So
But hasn't that failed? Which is Trump's point. Like I don't. It's not that I think Trump loves Russians. I think he looks at it and says that has failed. I mean, they made agreements and relationships with the larger part of the world. Russia has moved up into what the fifth or fourth spot in the G7, and they don't even consider themselves. I'm sorry, the G8 if you include Russia, but they don't even consider themselves part of it. Um, their economy is in flames, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean it's hot and it's burning hot in a way that's creating inflation. Um, hasn't that failed? I mean, the dollar has only gotten weaker in the sense Europe has only gotten weaker, which is our main transatlantic ally. If the sanction regime was successful, those things wouldn't be true. Or am I wrong on this?
no, you're definitely not wrong. I just think some neocons still cling to this old policy. They're very rigid in their thinking, and I think they always see Russia as the enemy, and there's a certain Cold War mentality that's persistent, and you see that among the population. Has been conditioned in that way, and that's why the RussiaGate
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
propaganda and Russophobia was so effective. So it's hard to do away with that. And they're still thinking of the glory days of the 80s when they bogged the Soviet Union down in Afghanistan and destroyed the Soviet Union. I think that's their model, Charlie Wilson's war. But
Yeah.
on the other hand, I think you have divisions in the ruling class. And I think that there are a lot of elements now around the Trump administration. And I know that this is the thinking of Eldridge Colby, who's very high now in the Pentagon, William Colby's grandson. That the U.S. can benefit. That the goal of U.S. foreign policy should be to weaken the Russian-China alliance, and that there are Russia is such a a wealthy country as far as its mineral resources that the U.S. can cut some deals, and that the U.S. economy would really benefit from being able to either exploit those resources or engage in more commercial relation with the Russians. So they want to start to ease the sanctions and pry Russia more into the Western camp and then undermine this Russia China line. So I think that's the strategic thinking of some of the elements now prevalent in the Trump administration compared to the older neocons who's had a primary fixation with bleeding the Russians and have this Cold War mentality.
Mentality.